revenue is a really important thread. But to your point, unless you can affect change to motivate people to do stuff, it's really hard to get systems use, adoption across the board. There's technical debt, but there's also psychological legacy, where people just have always done things a certain way. Trying to be as real time around this AI change from an executive perspective and how to leverage it. And also, how to help my organization thrive through it, not because it's very easy to look at negative consequences, but I believe the lift it's going to give us is amazing, and the opportunity for our entire organization as well.
Transformation to me rests on one thing. It's whether or not you can minimize what I call passive resistance to change. On the surface level, everyone's sort of agreeing that this is the right thing to do, and they buy in and they have the information, but their behavior doesn't actually line up with what they're telling you. And so the results, right, ultimately you're looking at how's this impacting EBITDA, right? Are we getting growth? You're actually engineering resistance into your system. And what you need to learn is how to engineer passive resistance out. The way to do that is structured autonomy, giving people 1% design freedom on the transformation. So they feel like they're part of the transformation, not the object of change.
Hi, everyone. Daniel Kube here. Here's another installment of Executive Conversations with an old friend of mine who's done some pretty awesome and amazing things and continues to push forward with some really cool innovation with his latest endeavor. But it's Jesse Hops, and Jesse and I have known each other probably 12, 15 years. And we first met while he was starting up Demand Metric. And I'll let Jesse talk about that. In one of my prior companies was a huge tool because it aggregated a bunch of really useful assets for marketers. And when you're a startup entity, as you know, I've had many, it's a really useful place to go test and validate what you're doing and also get some thought leadership. Before LLMs, Demand Metric had literally thousands of assets on a very common topic for marketers that helped me and the organizations that I built along the way. So Jesse, thanks for doing that. And then we got to know each other, and the friendship began from there. But Jesse, I'd love to hear about your journey. I mean, you started off in the London area and you built a really cool company, but how did you get started and how did that all come to fruition initially?
Yeah, I mean, real briefly, first of all, Daniel, thanks for having me on the podcast. Really honored to be here. Thanks for reaching out. My story starts, I guess, way back when I was maybe 9 years old and knocking on doors, selling flowers door to door. I came from kind of a rough neighborhood in London, Canada, not London, England. Parents didn't have a lot of money, a lot of education, but I'd always wanted to kind of, rise up in life and get to a new station. So I worked really hard as a kid. So I worked door to door, worked at restaurants a lot. And then as I was going to Western University, my goal was to get into the Ivy School of Business. You'd probably know Ivy. It's one of the top business schools in Canada. And when I was 15, I told my mom, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to go to Ivy. And by the time I'm 25, I'm going to be a millionaire. That was my goal. And she's like, okay, keep dreaming, right? I set the goal and I had my sights on the school. And so I got into my first year. I didn't get pre-accepted in high school, which was one path to get in there. But it was really, really competitive. And I think I had like a 95 average, and it still wasn't enough to get pre-accepted. So I went into first year university and I got into philosophy, I think, as my undergrad. I thought, if I'm at university, and while I was in university, my parents went bankrupt. And so I had a loan from the bank. So over the summer in my first year, I had to get a job and I had to figure out how am I going to pay for school going forward. I was living on my own from the time I was about 15. And yeah, there was this company in London, a startup called Infotech Research Group that is now like I don't even know. I think it's probably $500 million in annual revenue, competes with Gartner pretty head on. And they were just getting going in the IT analyst, research kind of space. And they had come out of Ivy. And so the guy that founded it, Joel McLean, he taught at Ivy. And I was like, oh, maybe this is my path. I can get a job here. He can help me get into school, whatever. So I applied and got a job in inside sales at Infotech at this analyst firm. So that was kind of how I got started into the business overall.
And how did Demand Metric come to fruition?
Yeah, so about, I guess it took me 5 years to get through a 3-year degree. And I didn't end up getting into Ivy after all. I applied after 2 years. My grades were, again, mid-80s, not enough to get in, even with a great recommendation from Joel. I'd done all the Toastmasters and extracurricular stuff. But after 5 years, I was just about to graduate my philosophy degree. And I asked Joel, I said, hey, I kind of want to move out west to Vancouver. He's like, why? I was like, well, the weather kind of sucks here. And, young men go west. I mean, that's what my dad did. My uncle did. Everybody likes to go west when they're young. So I said, what if I can work from home and I'll do it from out there? you can trust me. You helped me through university. I worked kind of full time, went to school part time for all this time, kept up my numbers. He's like, yeah, we don't really do that. It's not really a thing. It kind of sets a precedent. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to quit then. And I'm going to move out west anyway. So I quit. I moved out west. He said, I'll help you with whatever you need. Got out there and got a job at Earl's washing dishes. That was my first job. Yeah. And then I got a job at a software company. I met this guy, Alfie, and Alfie was a great guy, British guy. I wanted to start a business. I knew I wanted to start my own company. That was kind of why I left Infotech. And I was going to do an events company, actually. I was going to do this thing called culture branding. And it was going to be like this whole sponsorship thing and get all the big companies that want to sponsor events. And I looked at it and I looked at the numbers. It would be a fun business, but it wasn't really going to get me where I wanted to go. Right. So I had it all ready to go and the first event planned. And then I was like, why don't I just take what I learned at Infotech and apply that business model to a different, job type, right? So we were talking to CIOs and IT directors. I thought, well, at that point in time, do you remember this was like early 2000s when Serious Decisions was first coming out and Eloqua in the marketing automation space was, that all that thought leadership was coming out. As a marketing in B2B is going through a revolution right now where it's not just communications and pretty pictures. It's really data driven and metrics oriented and revenue focused. Maybe there's a business in helping to operationalize this transformation of marketing as a function. So I called Joel and I said, hey, what do you think about doing an Infotech idea, but for marketing? He's like, well, I'll be doing it in 10 years. I'm going to do, HR after this and I'll get into marketing. So why don't you get it started and we'll see where you're at in a few years and I'll help you with whatever I can. So I talked to my boss, Alfie. I said, hey, man, I don't really have money to start this business, but I really think it can work. I've got a lot of experience in it, but I need some startup capital. I need a couple months of rent so that I can just try. He's like, well, how much do you need? And so I said, 2 months of rent, like 10 grand would be enough to kind of give the idea a go. This is before lean startup was even really a thing. And I said, I got some data. I've got a concept. I can build the product and test it and see if I can get some subscription sales.
Wow. And then, how did you, because one of the things that you did an amazing job with was building content. So you were selling, how did you manage to get all those assets created? And you also had different lines of business within Demand Metric. Was it just content initially? You must have started with consulting because you didn't have content.
To make a long story short, so I'll try to compress 10 years into 3 minutes here. The business model was sales first. So make the calls, right? And back then you could get a hold of people, right? You do 200 calls, you talk to 10 people. I didn't even know who was in charge. There was no data really. I just had 800 numbers for companies, about 500 times in a row. And so if you kind of think about lean startup, it was go sell, find a need, build something. Yeah. And I repeated that for years. And so we built our first 500 tools on the back of specific needs that the market asked for, jobs to be done really. And so that's how we built the assets, was all based on getting a sale to develop an asset and then get a subscription and then renewals. And we did a little advisory on the back of that. So that was kind of the content business, how we got going. It was me, 4 buddies in a loft in Vancouver, sleeping on futons. And I think I slept on the floor sometimes when I was hiring people to come and live and work with us. Yeah. I wish we could have done a reality show. It would have been a hoot. But that was kind of the genesis, how we got off the ground. We got a break when the American Marketing Association found our site and they said, hey, we love your stuff. We license this and white label it and send it to our members. And we thought, well, that would be a great, brand play for us. So we got into licensing of content. I didn't know what licensing was. I'd never heard of that before. So sounded like good money and it was all profit. So we started doing that. I mean, we've been licensing now with the ANA and AMA for well over 15 years. So that's been a great thing for us to get distribution and just sort of build up the brand. Around 2.5 years in, I want to say maybe 3 years in, we had a pretty good email list going, maybe 30, 40,000 marketers on it by that point from sampling the product on doing these cold calls. Yeah. And I think it was Marketo was the first one who called us. And it was like a director of demand gen or something. And they were like, do you guys do any syndication of your newsletter? I said, what's syndication? She's like, I'll give you $5,000 if you send an email with my white paper to your list. And it's a really good white paper. I was like, how many do you want to send? That sounds great. So we did our first deal with the vendors. I say selling my soul to the devil. We didn't really know that if you're in an analyst business, you probably shouldn't be doing both, right? We were kind of a media company, kind of an analyst company, but we didn't really have any rules. We were just trying to stay alive, right? So we started doing syndicated, sends. That turned into webinars, turned into research projects, turned into virtual summits where we had to have a keynote and a gold speaker, and then we would do the research leading up to the event. Probably did, I don't even know, a few hundred projects with, the Eloqua, Salesforce, Marketo's, HubSpot, a lot of the sales and marketing vendors. We got to know you guys, in that space. And so that was kind of the vendor business. John, my partner, is still kind of running that whole side of things, doing research around how technology is impacting revenue growth, that sort of thing, but mainly on sales and marketing, right? Not full IT spectrum there. So that was kind of the vendor side. Did that for a number of years. I mean, still kind of ongoing. Hey, we got to go buy a new sales enablement platform. How should we look at that? We'd give them the vendors matrix. Here's all the vendors. Here's a comparison tool. Here's an RFP. Here's a decision-making tool. Here's an implementation guide. Just really practical stuff to help them do their job in little pieces, things you wouldn't even imagine, but we ended up building well over 1,000 of these tools. That's really, I think, what we got known for was the tools and templates. Yeah.
And so at the peak, is it at the peak of number of members now, or? Yeah,
I mean, it's always kind of growing. I think we're over 300,000 members that have joined Demand Metric to use our material. And that's not counting all the distribution we've had through the associations. But yeah, I mean, we're awesome. In the millions of downloads, I'd say, for the content. But yeah, as you know, the content game is shifting. I mean, there's a lot of great ideas in the AI tools nowadays. You don't really need to go to an analyst firm to learn how to think about and structure things so much. So we were really kind of forced to reinvent ourselves at several different points. I mean, you're an entrepreneur for 20 years, bootstrapping, as you know. Yeah. You need to pivot and learn how to create value in new ways constantly, right? So
yeah, because I think when you and I were engaging pretty heavily, I think that's when the sort of winds of change literally started picking you up, because you started flying all over the world to consult some organizations, and you were in Japan one day, Germany the next. I just remember your schedule was crazy, and you were helping some major global multi-billion-dollar brands with some very specific problems and challenges. And I think you learned a bunch there that really seeded what you're doing today. Maybe talk about that voyage, and also how you also began to identify how you had some really great content, but you shared with me that the content was pretty specific, but ultimately you really need to do it in person because there's a lot of leakage that can be very costly.
Yeah, I learned a lot over the past 5 or 6 years working. So with Demand Metric in the content business, we were an inch deep and a mile wide, right? We'd give everybody a do-it-yourself kind of access to a bunch of do-it-yourself consulting tools. We didn't really do consulting work. Even training or workshops wasn't really our business model. It was just more subscriptions, build more content. It was funny because we had launched this little software company, and we were trying to do something like a Monday.com, but without any capital. And it was I would say a flaming disaster of resources lost. We were trying to build what ClickUp ended up being before ClickUp came out. The basic thing was there was a lot of systems that had a Kanban board. Remember, everyone was using Trello, but you couldn't really mash Kanban boards up into one simplified view if you just wanted to see across the board, across 40 boards, what's high priority this week. And so we're like, let's just build that. And we'll add into it all of our methodologies. So you have all these pre-built project plans. We thought this was like this brilliant idea. We sunk a few years into it. We got about 50 companies adopting the solution. They put up with the technology. That was pretty buggy because we did such a great job on helping them with understanding their problem, their workflow, how to actually design a solution that the team would feel like they built and they owned. So we got really good at this group-based behavioral change. That was a new skill we learned, which was really difficult, and solutioning of spreadsheet messes and all this stuff. But our technology was pretty crap, and really project management technology is kind of a commodity. There was teamwork and a lot of other tools out there, right? So we kind of scrapped the software business. We had to offboard all of our clients that we had brought into new platforms because we felt bad. We convinced them to get into the tool. We shut down the tool, so we offboarded. So we learned a lot about process and behavioral change in the software journey. But while that kind of fiasco was happening, somebody needed to pay payroll. And so my partners, John and Matt, were kind of dealing with the software clients. I got an opportunity to do some deep kind of consulting, coaching type work with Mitsubishi Chemical Group. And so their head of market strategy development, same thing as usual, was doing a Google search, found one of our templates online. We're like, oh my God, this whale lead came into the CRM. Get a hold of this guy. My partner, Matt, booked him. We started talking about what he was trying to do. And he was basically wanting to build a strategy development playbook to roll out globally across dozens of teams. So we did a little advisory work with him to customize a playbook. And then he invited me to help him co-present at a workshop. And so that was the beginning of a 3-year journey with them, running around the world 3 times, a lot of time in Charlotte and Dusseldorf and Tokyo. And we were basically basically trying to get people using this new playbook, right? So in consulting, a lot of times it's about these playbooks, right? Like, here's the process we want to use, the analysis what we want you to do, and here's how this should help you execute, finding where to play and how to win in these markets. And in the chemicals business, it's really complicated because there's a million applications, right? Like, plastic goes into everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if it could be like a Yeti as an application, like an airline, has a million different things, and there's different prices people pay per kilogram depending on the application. So healthcare applications are much higher margin than, say, automotive. Well, that presents a really difficult strategy problem because every application you're trying to compete with different suppliers, and there's like this really complicated value or supply chain there. So I learned about complex strategy in the practice that giving people the information and the tools, even doing interactive workshops where they built some content or some strategy with us, they'd go back to work on Monday and nothing would have really changed. Licensed content to them for years. But I was really bothered by the fact that I didn't feel like it was really making the impact that it was intending to make, right? And so when I left, working with them, and they changed the CEO, the whole kind of management team changed out. My client Ron stayed on actually to help with some M&A stuff. He's since retired from Mitsubishi. Yeah, we had this. We didn't really have the answer at that point. We had the question, and the question was, how do you get people that are not super highly motivated, type A, people that win all the time, the ones that carry companies, entrepreneurs, the high performing sales guys? How do you get the people that are not that profile, everybody else, to want to win? How do you get them to want to perform, to grow, to get better at their job when they're not really intrinsically motivated to do that? And so I was baffled. I didn't know what the answer was to how do you get more people, the middle of the bell curve, to want to perform. And so when I left that assignment, I did well, help the company kind of get by over those years. But I really had that question in mind that, hey, we can do this dog and pony show, and I ended up calling it now transformation theater, where you've got the strategy decks, you got the playbooks, you do the workshops, you run around, they spend a ton of money, millions and millions of dollars to spend. But is it really impacting the bottom line in EBITDA, like at the end of the day? And my suspicion was that a big chunk of what's being spent on transformation is actually waste, and it's distracting people, and they're not really solving the right issue. So that was kind of, I'll stop there, but that was kind of a really great learning experience that you can get paid a lot to do consulting, playbook design, roll out my tools and templates and all that. But if at the end of the day, on Monday morning, the marketing and the sales guys don't actually think and act differently, what's the point? I mean, what are you really doing over there? So that was more of
a in your perspective, because while you were in one of those engagements, we engaged with one of these companies that you did the intro for. It didn't go because we were so big and so busy, but it was so interesting because a transformation is really weaving like a huge blanket together, right? And revenue is a really important thread. But to your point, unless you can affect change to motivate people to do stuff, it's really hard to get systems use adoption across the board for all the systems and solutions that are sort of changed from manual. And also there's also there's technical debt, but there's also psychological legacy, where people just have always done things a certain way. And I think that kind of
absolutely,
this frustration is kind of what had built you up to go to this new thing. So I know where you are, so I'm not going to steal it, but
sure.
I think it'd be really interesting for people to understand how you took that frustration and understanding that there was this slippage, it was like lack of getting traction, because I think people inherently want to try to do the right thing, but there are barriers in the way of them self-realizing that they can actually do it. And that sort of built, and you just didn't find this and say, hey, this is my new approach. You did a lot of research, and you built some programs. And this is super topical now, because as teams need to try to figure out who are the best people in my entity to leverage AI, you also want to say, how can I take the people I have and who are potentially, some people have called them anchors, because anchors slow you down, but they also keep you safe from a storm sometimes, right? So, and you would argue the current situation is kind of a storm, but this new entity that you created is great for leaders to help with transformation and activating the organization. But those skills that you're exposing, the things that you're teaching, are also super topical right now for people understanding how to transform their teams to really leverage this tsunami of AI. Because it's a reality now. It's not, is it going to happen? It's just how fast is it going to happen, and how can you embrace it to make sure you survive, right? It's just
Yeah, you got it. I fully agree. AI is not, it's not a question of it's when and how quickly and what's going to happen when we get a little bit further into it. A lot of fear out there. And, at the end of the day, transformation to me rests on one thing. It's whether or not you can minimize what I call passive resistance to change, right? And so it's not people outright saying, hey, and maybe they say this behind your back, right? When you leave the room, they tell their buddy, hey, this is never going to work here. We tried this before. Hey, you're the fifth guy that's tried this before. We tried doing CRM. It doesn't work for us. And that's a mindset, right? And so you get this passive resistance where people are like, okay, yeah, I'll log in. I'll put in the minimum data fields that are required, and I'll put in crap data. But you have sort of adoption. The dashboard lights up as being 80%, 90% are using the system, but the reports are unusable. The data is kind of crap, right? And so I think anyone that works in systems and software and transformation knows this, that you've got this on the surface level, everyone's sort of agreeing that this is the right thing to do, and they buy in and they have the information, but their behavior doesn't actually line up with what they're telling you. And so the results, right, ultimately you're looking at, how's this impacting EBITDA, right? Are we getting growth? Are we getting profitable growth? That's really the metric you got to use.
But you sort of coined that in your world as commercial excellence, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, commercial excellence is kind of a rebrand of digital transformation. And
Okay.
Because that guy got fired.
Is this a new thing? Is it called commercial?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's a new title. It's come out of B2B. A lot of pharma companies, a lot of industrials are starting to just change what used to be called digital transformation, because everything's digital. I mean, it doesn't really make sense in the first place, to commercial excellence, because it's less of an IT focused thing and more of a PMO thing, and more of we're doing this because we want to drive growth and revenue. And so we need to modernize our approach to understanding the market, selling and marketing. So it's kind of a rebrand, I would say, on the transformation function that's growing quickly. A few thousand people in the world with that title.
So there are commercial excellence titles now. Interesting.
Absolutely. Mainly with right now is a head of commercial excellence, reports to the head of strategy across a portfolio of businesses, right? So think of a large enterprise being, hey, you've got 10 business units and 50 product lines. Commercial excellence job, it's kind of like an internal consulting organization, is to drive growth and revenue and profit growth across all the regions, all the business units. And the business units are the ones typically funding this shared service, which is kind of
a tenant of this stuff. Anyways, very good, cool.
If you're trying to roll out pricing discipline and systems into businesses that don't know what it is, why they need it, or how it should work, that's what commercial excellence. One thing that they would do. They might also do upskilling, trying to close capability gaps. They may run market strategy development. They may try to get different business units working together in markets. A lot of organizations are structured around product lines and regions, not market segments. It's crazy to say, but a lot are still organized that way if they're asset heavy businesses in manufacturing. And so imagine I'll give you a good example. You got Tesla and these big conglomerate kind of chemicals or manufacturing companies. Might have like 10 different businesses all targeting Tesla with their product line. Well, Tesla's like, can you guys just figure out what you do and how you could help us and send one guy in here instead of like 10 different people not understanding and talking to each other internally? And that's the customer experience that's happening out there. So a lot of what commercial excellence leaders are trying to do is create a much more unified customer experience overall for their top, key global accounts and things like that.
So let's go back a bit. So talk to me about the research and how do you activate these people who are on the middle of the bell curve to be successful in your organization and all row in the same direction and activate and do things that are meaningful versus just showing up?
Yeah, it's really the secret sauce, I guess you could say. And it's so funny because I mean, I've been in research for business best practices my whole life, basically like 25 years, and I'd never come across this thing. And basically what happened was after the software fiasco, I was doing some enterprise consulting, kind of coaching stuff, the playbooks, the workshops, whatever. And I'd also launched this other little program, this consultant incubator thing. And so I was helping guys out of corporate life get transitioned into coaching and consulting as sort of their new career. People are living longer. It's hard to get a job after 55, 60 years old. So we launched this program. We had about 100 guys that were, again, learning from other guys who used our content to build a consulting practice. And serendipitously, the guy that I pulled out to help me as the coach of the program was probably our most successful customer of demand metric tools, who use them to monetize making sales playbooks and all this other stuff. So I thought he'd be the perfect guy. He does a lot of mentoring. He's had a few exits, and he works because he likes to now and not because he has to. And so he's done mentoring with startup founders for like 15 years, over 700 of them. I think he's helped to use the customer development principles from Lean Startup. He was helping them design Lean Startup back in the day. So his name's Kurt Friedman, great guy in San Luis Obispo. And Kurt's running the incubator. I remember I was with my wife up for a weekend. We got the kids to go with the grandparents, and we're on the way up to this nice weekend planned. And Kurt, I got a new opportunity. There's another big chemicals company that the guy that left Mitsubishi went to a new spot, and he's now head of this new function. He used to be head of transformation. Now he's head of commercial excellence, and he's got this plan from one of these big, call it top 3 strategy consulting firms in the world, of how to upskill the organization in sales and marketing over the next 4 years. And he wants us to develop some content and do some workshops and playbooks and all the usual stuff to help him build his academy. But I got this feeling like if we do this, we're going to use where people are like, yeah, I get it. I got the playbook. I understand. But that I'm not going to actually act differently. And I don't want to be complicit in this theater anymore, right? So I'm like, it's like the top performing, highly motivated, personal development oriented people to want to grow and develop. And he said, well, it's kind of funny you mentioned that. I've got a friendship with this guy. He's in my hometown, and his name is Paul Stoltz. And Paul is the world's leading expert in human ability. He's the master coach of the U.S. Olympic team, of all coaches. He's been faculty at Stanford and MIT, and he's developed this science over the last 40 years studying how human beings respond to adversity and how they are resilient. Our interpretation of adverse to it predicts pretty much everything in life, right? It predicts how well we deal with change. It predicts who's going to win in sales across all industries, predicts if you're going to beat diseases, if you're going to live longer, if you're going to stay married. Pretty much everything human beings endeavor to do, your ability to deal with setbacks, challenges, difficulties is the thing. It's not about IQ. It's not about EQ. It's about AQ. And AQ is, how do you deal with things emotionally when the shit hits the fan, right? Like, it doesn't matter when things are going well. It's when things are bad that response matters. So he said, you got to meet this guy. You got to meet Paul, learn about what makes winners win and what makes people that struggle. So I flew to San Luis Obispo. I told him the situation. I said, hey, we got this company. It's a German chemicals company. Chinese chemicals are flooding the market, right? They're getting beat up in a lot of different industries. They're really trying to figure out, how do we transform and how do we win out there and sell on value? And I've been kind of commissioned to just deliver training on typical business best practices. But my feeling is that that's not going to do it here. That's not what's going to get them over the hump. He's like, no, I can assure you that giving them the information on what they should do isn't going to solve the problem. What you need to do is you need to consider that there's a bell curve in every large organization, right? And so this bell curve has, people on the front end that are highly adaptable, highly resilient, thriving on adversity. Entrepreneurs as a group of people are the top of the AQ scale. And on the bottom end, you've got people that are helpless, they've learned to be victims. They're, well, it's out of my control, so why even try? That kind of mentality. And they're the anchors that you mentioned. They're the ones that are opposed change fundamentally. Doesn't matter what the change, if it's good, it's bad, they're not doing it because they don't like change. But this bigger group in the middle, so Paul calls these guys the climbers. They're always on the climb, right? Forward and up. He's got these guys down here. These are the quitters. These guys basically have just kind of given up on life. They've quietly quit. They still get the paycheck, but they do the minimum. You know the type I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And then there's this big, huge group in the middle, right? Your B and C players. I mean, these are what you call campers. Campers have arrived at a certain point in life in their career, and they just want to keep things the way they are. They don't want to risk it to get better. They just want things to not change because they don't want to lose what they've already accomplished. And so that's the majority of the world, is that they live in this camping state. And so when a new transformation comes in, a new leader comes in, it's, oh my God, all this stuff's coming at us. Let's just try to minimize the impact on us. And the passive resistant group, right? The climbers are like, hell yeah, let's do it. Let's try it. It's new, it's innovative. Let's make this work. So in change management kind of theory, right? You got this, 20% kind of go for it all the time, 20% are kind of against it all the time, and you got this middle group, and you got to get the ones that are for it to pull the middle group through faster than the other ones can detract and pull them down. That's kind of the thinking, right? Well, AQ measures this. So you can know in advance who's going to accept it, who's going to completely walk against it, and who's going to be kind of seeing what happens. The good news is it's not like IQ where it's fixed. You can permanently improve people's response to adversity once you measure it and you share this with them, that how they're wired from the time they're about 12 years old. This is kind of a hardwired pattern of response. They can change how they view challenge and difficulty. And when they do, it's not about the business impact so much. You can absolutely change these people's lives in their relationships with their children, their family, their health. I mean, all these things. So the real challenge is, how do you get the campers back on the climb? Right? The climbers are already getting it done. That's where the results are coming from for the most part right now. Quitters are dragging everybody down. You do need to sort of deal with them, but you're not gonna make transformation work focusing on the quitters. It's how do you get some campers back on the climb? And so we partnered with Dr. Paul Stoltz and Peak Learning and his Global Resilience Institute to bring this adaptability measure and method for improving it into the transformation practice. Almost everyone with an MBA has never heard of AQ. It's a behavioral science thing. But what's really, really interesting, I'll send you this report after the call, or we can put it in the chat here. McKinsey did this study. So I'm talking to Paul about this situation with this new German chemicals company. He's like, oh yeah, it's predictable. He's like, I can tell you right off the bat, if they don't improve their collective AQ, they're not going to get through this transformation. It doesn't matter what consulting you get, what systems you get, what tools you get. It's a psychology problem. It's a behavioral and a mindset problem. So I was like, well, how do you fix it? He's well, for 40 did an upskilling program. It's been more of a mindset shifting thing.
Oh, Jesse.
So I said, well, my job right now is to upskill.
You froze for 10 seconds there. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. So
how do you? I heard. How do you fix it? And then there's this big climactic pause.
All right. So Paul said you need to raise the collective AQ in the organization, right? So if they're at like a 75% in ability to adapt, and imagine with AI coming, right? If we think we're helpless, we're going to lose our jobs to AI. So why even bother trying to do new stuff? The organization's going to fail. If we think, well, climate change, it's too far gone, nothing we can do about it, we're screwed. Do you really think we're going to solve it? Or we need to get more people thinking about solutions and how to solve issues than finding reasons why it can't work, right? That's just in general in life. So Paul said, really the key to transformation is going to be raising the level of AQ of the organization. I said, well, that's what you kind of do. You do these keynotes, you do the measurement, all that. That's not really my job here. My job and what I've been hired to do is upskill sales and marketing teams. So how can I bring what I've learned here about what makes people better at work and more engaged and innovative and all the rest of it? How do I bring that into this upskilling program thing that I'm trying to do here, right? So I go back to my client and I said, hey, I went out and I met this guy, and he works with Olympians and he works with, top companies and all the top business schools, Harvard, MIT, Stanford, INSEAD, they all use this in their problem solving courses. It's the best of the best material. It's predictive. It's got 5,000 independent studies. How do we incorporate this into this upskilling thing? I was like, do you really want them to just score that they had the knowledge on the test, or do you really want the organization to succeed and to start winning again? He's like, no, I want real impact, right? I'm measured on EBITDA, not attendance, right? So I found this report. I did some research and I found this report from McKinsey. Okay. It was a McKinsey Health Institute report on adaptive leadership. I don't know if you ever saw this thing. Okay. It was like I was looking for the business case, the stat or the research to show that this AQ theoretical, like behavioral science stuff and business impact were like correlated somehow. And Paul had all his stuff. I mean, he had studies with Deloitte on people getting promoted faster and, a bunch of other companies. But it wasn't coming from a top consulting organization. So and we were reacting to a strategy recommendation from one of these top organizations. My client's boss was a former strategy consulting partner at one of these firms, right? Who bought the plan. Yeah. So I needed something at that level that was going to be convincing. Well, I do the Google searching, like how does adaptability and resilience factor into, engagement and business results and impact? And this study came up perfectly. Adaptive leadership. So McKinsey Health Institute, they did a study with 30,000 people. And what they found was that when 4 factors were present, okay, adaptability and resilience were kind of the human side of it. When people self-reported that they felt like they're good with change. I can form new habits easily. I can bounce back when I, have a setback or I get ill or whatever else, right? If they felt like they were resilient and adaptable, they were about 3.8x more innovative and engaged at work. Right? We know engagement is like a major issue across the board all around the world, right? So if people are, but that was kind of like, well, that makes sense, right? Because this AQ stuff I'm learning about, that's just showing that the people that are, adaptable and resilient are also engaged and productive and innovative. Well, what can the organization do? And so the other 2 factors, though, that raise that innovation and engagement, up from 3.8 X to 6x more. Now, 6 times psychological safety and organizational support, right? But the shame of it is only 23% of people out there of this 30,000 sample, which is a pretty big sample, all industries, all companies, or all countries, basically, only 23% felt that they were highly resilient and highly adaptable. So you're trying to get wide sweeping change across tens of thousands of people, when almost 8 out of 10 will tell you right out of the gates, I'm just not that good at taking in new changes.
Were the parallels in the study universal by country and
Basically.
Region? So 23% across all region. Okay.
Certainly not. If you're interested in what country has the highest AQ, I'll give you a couple of guesses. But it's not just because they've had a lot of adversity. It's that they've learned how to respond well to adversity. They're 2 different things. Just because you get a bunch of crap at you doesn't make you better at responding to it, right? Necessarily. But, I will say entrepreneurs are at the top of the scale as a group of people. Teachers, of all groups are at the lowest end of the scale.
Oh, wow.
And which is great because they're in front of our kids all day. Right. And so, yeah.
The role models.
Yeah, so you kind of have these people that thrive on adversity, and you got these people that are like learning to be helpless and victims, right? On 2 ends of the spectrum. Oh no, it's the government. Oh no, it's the big companies. Oh no, it's whatever. So it's all really about accountability, personal accountability and responsibility. There's a whole science to it. You can read up on AQ and read Paul's books, Adversity Quotient or Adversity Advantage. But at the end of the day, we found this study that said if we can, and I think it was like 16% of organizations are investing to make their people more adaptable, right? So you got you need it. People don't feel that they have the adaptive capacity. You're relying on that to get major change pushed through, but only 16% of companies are actually investing in building that adaptive capability, right? The soft stuff has really become the hard thing now. Is getting people to want to change, to be open to change, to be excited about new and exciting possibilities. So we found that. We looked at the study. We said, no matter what we do here, we need to not just give people information. Transformation is not an information problem. It's not a strategy. It's not a clarity issue. Companies know what to do. It's getting people to do it consistently, right? When things get tough and customers are demanding, you're trying to do pricing discipline, customers end of the quarter grinding you. It's in those moments that the behavioral change, if that doesn't take, the transformation doesn't really happen, right? And so we need to fortify and enrich people's ability to change in order to get any transformation, no matter what it's about, to really stick and to last. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
So we pitched it as a mindset skill set, tool set framework, whereas most consulting and transformation work is kind of tools first, as opposed to mindset first. Get them ready to change and transform, get them to harness adversity instead of get bogged down and beaten down by it, then develop skills. So we can get into more about how do you develop skills in people. I don't believe that traditional classroom training, providing information, doing simulations works, really. I look at the guys that went out to Crotonville. Anyone that worked at GE before that went through some leadership training there? Yeah. So Crotonville was this kind of amazing place. You'd go and they would give you these real world projects, right? And so we decided in the academy, I was hired to build content. Sorry, did I lose you, Daniel? You look a little bit frozen on me there. Okay. Yeah. So the mindset piece we kind of had figured out. We got to work on it. Everybody uses it. It's at the top of like every elite organization. We got to bring that into transformation. Who knows about AQ and transformation? Nobody that I've talked to in the past 2 years has ever even heard of it, right? But yet it's the most reliable science we have about getting people better with change, right? It doesn't even appear in change management books, right? The issue really is you can't manage change. People don't, they resist when they're being asked by someone else to change, right? If you can't change anyone, they got to want to change for themselves, right? So you can't try to get people to be better because you think they should be better, and you can't just tell them do this behavior. Otherwise, I mean, if information was the issue, we'd all be walking around like fitness models in perfect health, right? Yeah. We know better, we just don't do it, right? So mindset, we figured, was probably the most important factor that's being overlooked by the entire software consulting and training industrial complex. Billions spent. The only people making money are the software and the training and consulting companies, but the enterprise's foot in the thing called guided discovery. And guided discovery is where you use the Socratic method. My kids, they actually go to a school, they went to Montessori, now this new school called the Fontaine system. It's all like correspondence. It's like independent learning. Here's the questions, and then you have a teacher, a coach that you can go ask questions of, and you decide when you're ready for your exams. And so this idea of don't tell people what to do, ask them what their challenges are, have them frame up their own problems, their own needs, and get involved in the design of the solutions. That's the critical unlock. And so question becomes, how do you, I say you need to provide structured autonomy to people, especially frontline sales guys, mid-level managers, right? This is where
so love your perspective on this. So, I mean, this is great in a perfect world, right? So when you have stability in an organization, I would argue right now, all organizations are feeling very destabilized.
Yeah, right. I think in that situation,
it's like, how do you make that happen in that environment?
Okay, so this was the 2-year experiment we've been running. This is really a social experiment. So we need intrinsic motivation. We can't tell people what to do. We need them to feel capable of doing it. We need them to see that it's completely relevant for their job day to day. How many times, Daniel, have you seen? I've personally seen this at least 10 times. A CRM system that someone, maybe even a sales guy, got involved on the design team, and he stopped being a sales guy and then he started being this internal consultant guy. And all he does is he looks at the screens and the fields, and he's like, in this perfect world, if we had all the time to collect all this data and all the information, we could have this amazing system and this amazing reports, and we could feed management everything they want. And then they try to go get the field to use it, and they're like, you want me to fill out 97 fields every opportunity? I got 20. Like, do you forget about doing our job? Like, that is impossible. It's just it's a pipe dream of what you can actually expect people to do. Mainly because they're so focused on this task of this system or this process, they forget about everything else, all the other demands on these people most of the time, right? And so the people designing systems and processes are so divorced from the actual day-to-day reality of the job that they often over-engineer what that system could and should be for a perfect world. That's where the real problem comes in. So the contrarian point of view on this is, well, how the hell am I going to run transformation and let the sales guys decide what we're going to do here? That's crazy talk. We're going to have chaos, right? That's what everyone would think, okay? And I don't say that you need to not have any top-down standardization or programs that, hey, we're moving to SAP, like it's happening, we're doing it.
Yeah, we had some, I mean, by the way, this has been awesome. You've had a couple where some of your key ideas, but I'm hoping Malika's side, because sometimes I get a chop and she sees it perfectly. So it just, But so, and Malika, just edit this portion out. But so this is awesome content, and it's a big topic. But I want to, how do you take what you're talking about now into what you're doing now, and how can you help leaders? Because one of the things I think it's important, is you're talking about this concept of these things that seem variable, but the concept of excellence is somehow also repeatable. So therefore, somehow standardized. So how do you segue that?
I can answer it pretty quickly. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah.
Well, just tee me up with a question, then I'll close the loop off. Yeah.
Okay. So Jesse, these are great learnings, but if you're talking about all these sort of one-off projects where sales guys are in giving input to improve things, how do you make that a repeatable sort of standard solution that can be replicated elsewhere in your organization? Because if they're snowflakes, it's really hard to replicate snowflakes.
Yeah, I hear you. So basically, what we designed, working with this client Roy at this big, about a $7 billion chemicals company, was this what we call this next generation commercial excellence academy structure. It's basically engineering an environment for adaptation to occur naturally, okay, rather than the typical top-down, mandated change. And it's not to say Roy doesn't have dozens of corporate projects on the go. I mean, major pricing initiatives, all kinds of stuff happening. What we added in was a layer. Imagine you're adding a layer into your typical strategy consulting, system deployment, and training stuff. And this academy layer is where you activate and drive the engagement and the innovative behaviors of the field. So imagine this, okay? So picture this. We kind of have this, align, inspire, reflect, apply framework, okay? Align is go find out from the business unit leaders, the regional heads, what are the capabilities that if they could wave a wand and they could just get better at these things overnight, what would they be that would actually make an impact on the business from their point of view? What do they think? We had a list of like 50 in our matrix. There's 50 capabilities. The big consulting firm was like, you got to close all 50 over 4 years. We're going to do rounds and rounds of training to close these capability or these knowledge gaps. We said, that's too many. Pick 4. Pick 4 things that you think, you're the one who's paying for our function. What do you want to get better at? And they came down to key account excellence, right? Go-to-market strategy, value-based pricing, and opportunity and pipeline management. We're kind of the 50, those were the 4 that floated to the top, right? So that was the align phase. To get the whole field to be bought in and encouraged to work on these things, okay? We had them watch some podcast-style videos. So we recorded some video of an expert. We actually got the guy from Mitsubishi to do a podcast. And we said, hey, Ron, listen, what's status quo? What do most companies do when it comes to key account excellence? And what is the best you've seen out there? And they did some benchmarking with some other companies that did a really good job of pipeline and opportunity management, all this kind of stuff. So he drew this gap between normal and best in class without doing a maturity assessment or a diagnostic or any of that typical consulting crap, right? You've seen my maturity assessments. Yeah. We got all kinds of them. We said, let's do a podcast. Let's plant some seeds on we're doing this, but maybe we could do that. Maybe we could consider that. So that was the inspire phase. As we sent out the AQ and grit assessments ahead of meeting with people. So they would measure their AQ. We gave them a guided discovery assignment to ask, how would this show up in your work? How would improving in this capability area manifest in making life easier, helping us hit our North Star kind of goals? And we prepped them mentally to then meet with them together. So we brought these cohorts of 30 or 40 people together. We're on cohort 6 right now. And we started in North America. We figured it might be a little bit more open-minded to trying some new things than German headquarters, right? And we called it the Commercial Excellence Academy. And we brought in Dr. Paul as a keynote speaker. So the first half of the day on day 1, there's 2 days. Day 1 was learn all about AQ, learn all about grit and the science and how this can impact people's personal lives. Then we revealed their scores and all that. So they were all kind of really excited. They're like, wow, maybe we can take these challenges and adversities we have and use them as fuel to help us get to a place we would have never otherwise gotten to without having the challenges. So motivationally, people are very excited about this. We told them, we're not consultants. We're not here to tell you what to do. You're the consultants, okay? Put your consulting hat on and let us know. What are your top challenges when it comes to why is key account excellence? Why is doing it the textbook way not easy for you? Right? What's the difficulty with standing up on price? They're like, well, you got China dumping all kinds of overcapacity in our markets. I mean, how do we win against that? We can't value-based price on sustainability. People don't want to pay, right? So we're getting all the reasons why it can't work on the table, all the challenges and issues. We ask them what they've tried so far. We ask them what they need. What would they need to solve this? And they littered the conference room with challenges, hurdles, actions they've tried, the impact of not solving these things and what they needed or what they felt they needed. That was day one. So people kind of imagine like design thinking, right? You're kind of opening the aperture up. Well, now we got like everyone thinking about adversity and how they can respond, all these adversities. And I'm talking dozens, hundreds maybe of adversities. Day two is about focus. And we said, listen, for the next 90 days, okay, we're going to pair you up with a coach. And we're not going to give you a guy like Jesse, who's an analyst, a consultant type guy, career consultant. We're going to pair you up with an operator coach, a guy who ran, business units and was a CEO of chemicals companies for the next 90 days. And you're going to design what's called a growth project. And a growth project, okay, we call this structured autonomy. So we said within the bounds of those 4 capability areas and your own problems and challenges and needs, pick something you're intrinsically motivated to go work on. So we said, okay, here's the 4 stations. We have 4 corners. We got about 35, 40 people. First thing was go into the corner that you want to work on. Is it key account? Is it go-to-market? Is it pricing? Is it pipeline? And they spread out, right? And we said, we mixed business units together. And we said, listen, form teams, okay, spontaneously form teams of 3 to 5, pick a topic, anything you want, as long as it's related to improving your capability in one of these areas. And we give them these charters, a project charter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basic 1-pager. We blew them up onto 3x4 big piece of paper. We put them up on the walls and we gave them sticky notes. And we said, your job for the next 3 hours is to form a team, make a problem statement, look at the current state and a future state of, where you want to get to. It's a completely safe environment. We know that no one's perfect on any of this stuff. We know we got all kinds of internal issues. The hardest part for them was picking something. They were like, we got so many things that we could do to get better around here. But you can see by letting them analyze their own problems, look at their needs, design a 90-day sprint, just a 90-day thing. You don't have to solve this problem. You might just shine a light on it, build a business case, do a little research. So some teams wanted to say, let's go do a pilot with AI. Others were like, hey, we got this problem where it takes us 30 days to get an SKU up into SAP and we're getting killed because we can't quote fast enough, right? That's a real problem. They're like, but it's way out of our control. That's like master data and IT and all these other departments. No way we can solve that. We're like, no. You might be able to make some progress on it. Let's at least illuminate the issue. So I think in the first cohort, we had 16 or so projects that came out. And in the afternoon, it was like a science fair. We all walked around like in a group and they presented their science fair project. Like, this is the problem. This is what we're intending to do. And this is like a little part-time project in addition to everything else they have to do. And the initial objection was, well, maybe people see this as extra work that we don't have time for, right? And we said, no. This is the work. If there's one adversity that's getting in your way of hitting our growth targets and you got support and resource to go and fix that problem, we're going to look at strategy like Richard Rummelt does and not say, let's make goals and ambitions. Let's solve issues like entrepreneurs do, right, to keep alive and actually deal with what needs to be true to win. And so we set up all the projects. They get the charters going. We present. We had a board member that was actually in the room and she walked around and she was blown away at the level of engagement. There was zero training. It was them deciding what problems to work on. So then the coaching gets started, 90 days. Weekly call, how's it going? No answers being given, teaching people how to fish by asking questions. And so we're now on the sixth cohort. They've executed, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 of these growth projects. Wow. And here's what we learned, okay? By letting the sales guys and the regional managers and kind of mid-level sales management and marketers work across business units and pick the issues they wanted to work on and make some progress. And then they'd present at the end of the 90 days to like a board panel and they would get additional resource if they wanted to scale up or some things just ended, but others became new best practices, right? One was like, how do we make a decision between indirect or direct on the channel? They made a little template for it. And they said, hey, Jess, you got any templates? I was like, oh, don't worry about it. I got all kinds of templates back here. But we generated the demand for the playbooks because they asked for it for some help, not us shoving a template on them. In the end, the CEO got behind this. And I mean, this is a company going through drastic cost cutting, right? And they decided, let's bring this to Germany. Let's try it in HQ. And let's just see, maybe this American guy at this AQ, like who knows if it's going to land here. Well, Paul's been doing this at Carnegie Mellon University with a lot of German companies for a very long time, with Bosch and Mercedes and all them. He was confident that the German leadership would really like it because it's so scientifically based. It's so rigorous. There's so much research behind it. So we get to Germany and we do the same, another round of the academy. People are saying things like, the academy is my happy place. This is where we can actually talk about the real issues that, we don't get a chance to talk about otherwise, right? And some of the issues were contentious, right? They're like, we have friction because other departments doing their job are creating inadvertently this problem for us with our customers. And so the construct is you add this layer in, this academy layer in, where people get to choose a problem and develop a solution. And you know what happened to all the other top-down mandates and projects? The acceptance and the social contract was changed. So when Roy started this whole program, with every leader, he said, listen, I'm not going to give you one size fits all. We're not going to just go implement everything like the same across all regions at the same time. That's what most people do because they think it's more efficient. You're going to pick what thing you want to work on, right? We're going to work on these things together. I got a whole host of things that Commercial Excellence can consult and help you with, but you get to choose. But here's the deal. If you go work on something and develop a best practice in your region or your unit, and then we take that and we try to spread that through the rest of the company as the new way of working, will you, on the flip side of getting to work on what you are passionate about doing, be open-minded to pick up and receive something that somebody else in the company picked up and worked on? And he made the deal with everyone. This was a deal. They all said, yeah, of course, if I can work on the thing that I think is most important to us growing, then yeah, I'll be open to trying some new things from other people. It's kind of a fair deal. And so there was no more. It was pulling. And so even at the corporate ComEx projects level, when we added this little tiny layer in, imagine this, you give them 1% control over the design of the transformation, the other 99% that's been playing with the McKinseys and the Deloittes and all that, that lands so much easier because you respected the autonomy and the identity of these people that you're trying to get to change with a small portion of it. So you let them design something that they feel is real. All the other projects, all the other meetings, going in, meeting with McKinsey, meeting with new vendors, was a completely different mindset. And we also helped to reframe the adversity and the ability to adapt and deal with change through the whole program of getting hundreds of people measuring and working through real adversities on their growth projects with a coach who's been trained on how to reinforce the frameworks that Paul's developed around improving it.
So you're talking like this is transformational from an economic impact perspective
80,
as well.
Well, let me put it this way. So not all this is attributed to the academy, certainly, but in general, the client took the job within a month, changed the entire plan on how to do upskilling, which is a really risky move, right? He said, I'm going to cut the consulting budget by 80%, but you got to give me some leeway here on how I approach transformation. In less than a year, he had a mid 8-figure impact on CFO-validated EBITDA.
Wow.
In fairness, some of that was a pricing change thing, but once you pull the pricing lever, I mean, you've got to find some other ways to organically grow that EBITDA. And so the big thing was not so much just the short-term EBITDA that he was able to generate. It's the visible momentum, the feeling that the company, instead of being beaten down and there's no way we're going to get through this, to now it's optimistic. The culture's changing around, no, we can do this. We can get proactive. We can solve these issues. They're back on the climb as a collective organization at scale. So rapidly changing the mindset and the behavior of people is doable. It's just not the way that 90% of the guys I talk to in the consortium that we put together are doing it. They're still stuck in the old, hire McKinsey, hire Deloitte, get the trainers in there, get the content out there, and have the passive resistance and selective adoption, and just blame the people for being resistant and not able to execute for why we didn't succeed in our job. And I'm saying, no. You're actually engineering resistance into your system. And what you need to learn is how to engineer passive resistance out. The way to do that is structured autonomy, these growth projects, and giving people 1% design freedom on the transformation. So they feel like they're part of the transformation team and organization, not the object of change, that everything's aimed at them, that they're actually part of the whole entire ship moving forward.
So the current gig you're running and you're starting to share these best practices in a community, what does that look like and how can people get involved?
Yeah, so it's called the Commercial Excellence Consortium. When I found this new title of this guy, I thought maybe there's more guys like him that we can help with this and share his story. So really our chief client is sort of a big ambassador, a big, member of the community. And we're doing monthly roundtables basically where no consultants, no sponsors, no vendors, no sales guys, only peers. So director, VP level, running strategy, transformation, or commercial excellence at multi-billion-dollar B2B companies. It's invite only. So you get invited to join the consortium. It's free. Once they've joined, they get on the list, and we invite them to monthly roundtables. So we did one on enterprise adaptability last month. We brought in Dr. Paul to speak at some of these. Roy spoke about intrinsic motivation, broken down his program as a case study. And we're really just creating this peer exchange network. But it's not a Gartner peer community. It's not one of these typical things where there's an upsell on the back end and everyone's going to be attacking you at this conference. It's truly peer-to-peer. And I'm running it as a nonprofit. I just want the world to see that there is a way to rapidly transform and grow and adapt, and getting it out there. This way of doing it, it's pretty economical. We've gotten 170 members, and these are very senior executives. The lead cost on these guys would be in the thousands of dollars to try to get an interaction with them. They're happily joining this group and joining the roundtables. And so that's the start. If I can get a few more organizations on the climb and to realize that they're causing a lot of the, by the way they're approaching change, it'll have been kind of worthwhile.
Yeah. So, Jesse, this has been awesome. I know we're way over time. Malika's probably yelling at me on the back, but
sure.
I would love to, because I'm sure you're living and learning real time like I am right now, because I am kind of, trying to be as real time around this AI change from an executive perspective and how to leverage it, and also how to help my organization thrive through it, not and embrace it, right? Because it's very easy to look at negative consequences, but I believe the lift it's going to give us is amazing, and the opportunity for our entire organization as well. But I'm sure your execs are struggling with this as well, right? Because if you take your model and that 1% and now you add gasoline to the fire where that 1% now can drive potentially like 50% real impact with capacity they never had before or more, right? And if you raise that to, like, some people are now talking 10 and 40x impacts across different roles, like that magnification is insane.
I'm seeing it myself. I'm running this consortium virtually by myself, and I'm able to do the job of what I would have had a team of 6 to 10 doing before, with very, very small amounts of money and time myself. That being said, critical thinking isn't going anywhere. Using the LLMs effectively and not having it be a yes man and tell you what you want to hear is a skill in and of itself. I think, though, before we help people learn how to use the AIs effectively, we need to get them thinking about the opportunity that AI provides positively. If we have people going into it as this is this big threat, it's going to be terrible, they're going to have a self-fulfilling prophecy on that. So to me, fundamentally, we need to change their relationship with change and disruption, and get proactive with how they're learning how to adapt and move forward. And so I think it's help people with resilience and adaptability first, then give them real world projects that they can do to make life easier in their function, using AI, leveraging AI and the technology that we have, with someone who's been there and learned and done this before, and can kind of guide their discovery through how to use it effectively.
So that's, and then a high school student.
Could be. I would say actually our best coaches on it are less technically inclined. They've learned how to make GPTs and stuff, but they're much better at framing questions that are not leading questions. And so researchers, actually, I found that researchers who've done real, solid clinical type research are probably some of the best, because AI will often take what you've said and build on that. So it's kind of like when you're trying to design a research study.
I don't know if you hacked, but using Grok brutal truth mode.
Oh no, I haven't used that one.
Yeah, because all the A's are pandering to you, right? They want to make you feel good and stuff. But Grok brutal truth will say, don't waste your time on that.
That's cool.
Focus on building the business or whatever, right? And it'll separate the wheat from the chaff and put a real objective filter on it for you.
I can't wait to try it. That sounds great.
It's actually, if you have a business plan or whatever, if you think, and it allows, it definitely takes the rose-colored glasses off of your LLM.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I've noticed a lot of things are quietly clean and lived, these days. And when I see that in a post, I'm like, you're not even cleaning up your AI slop to the point where it's, other people can clearly spot it, right, in a
Yeah,
second. So anyway, there's a lot to come. I think we're entering an age of disruption like we've never seen before, and the ability for human beings to positively adapt to the environment is more important than
oh, for
probably
sure.
ever. So I'm really passionate about getting Paul's life's work in front of the world to help them with this massive amount of adaptation that's going to need to happen with reskilling people. I mean, a lot
Yeah,
of knowledge worker jobs are going to go away. These people are going to need to find something to do. Human beings and connection, and
sense of
that's not going
purpose.
away. A
Yeah,
sense of purpose is going to be key. But before people find their purpose, they need to be better at dealing with change in the first place. And I think
yeah.
I'm grateful I found AQ. I found it in a business context where I could use it to help people at scale. And I'm hopeful that through this platform and others, we can get more people
Yeah, for sure.
understanding their own relationship with change and adversity, and strengthening that for not only their job, but their family, their community. I mean, all the impacts that can have
Yeah,
on the
so we
rest
have
of
a
the world.
lot of people in our world who are still digital transformation experts, but I guess they're becoming commercial excellence experts. So I'm sure they'll be pinging and nudging you. It's exciting.
Yeah,
Anyways, with that said, we should wrap. And we will do a part 2 on the AI stuff, maybe in 6 months, because I'm sure this is going to be very topical for a bunch of your forums coming up. And we'll
absolutely.
share what we're learning in the trenches.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you having me on the show here, Daniel.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse.